Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. Um, Hope everybody had a good break. Hope we get some Red Bulls. I know there were some Cokes and Pepsis, right? Everybody, do we need to do some jumping jacks? Um, Before I kick off, can we just do a quick round of applause for the Finovate team? So far, this has been amazing. There's a huge team behind here that you guys don't always get to see. We've got the camera guys in back. They're doing a fantastic job. We're super grateful for all that they do. And really to kick off, kind of want to really just to bring this in a little more family style, right? I want to introduce you to somebody. So this kid right here is a beautiful, rambunctious 5-year-old, right? As you can see from this picture, I grew up in a house with a lot of brothers. And as you can see in all of their 80s wear glory, right? We had a lot of fun in that house, but I love my brothers, I really do. But we all tended to be a pretty strong cup of coffee, right? We're all kind of type A personalities. Some may even say we're competitive jerks. And so that led to a lot of fights in the Anderson household growing up. And I thought, in my wonderful Rambo approach to life at the time, that I was a little bit bigger, and so if I could just tackle my brothers, I could get on top and I could win the fight. And so I came up with this ingenious fighting style, which is still affectionately referred to as the bull charge, right? Meaning if I got mad, I would just duck my head and I would try and tackle my brothers, get on top of them and fight. And it worked, at least once or twice, right? And then what happened is my brothers figured that out. So what would they do? Well, they would stand about a foot away from the wall and wait for the inevitable bull to come charging in, and would just ever so gently sidestep and guide me into the wall, right? And again, this was the 80s, 90s. There wasn't a whole lot of concussion protocol going on at that time. And so, again, it led to a lot of painful experiences in my childhood. It also led to an uncanny ability to be able to patch drywall, which has served me even now, right? So why do I tell this other than just to break the ice in a 15-minute keynote? What I see, unfortunately, in the financial industry is there are a lot of companies that approach fraud the same way. That they look at it head on and they run straight at it, right? They approach the problem from the front, and that's their only strategy, is we've got to stop it from coming in the door. If we can just stop all fraud, it will be better. The challenge with that is fraud is ever changing. And ultimately, we have to not only prevent it from coming in the door, but once it's in the door, what are we doing to make it a better process, right? Fraud is more than a P&L line. It's more than the burgeoning budget item that we see. It impacts really and truly every aspect of the financial industry. It impacts your customer service. It impacts your operations team who have to stay regulatorily compliant, that they have to stay up to date on what's happening. It impacts your leadership, right? Most importantly, it impacts your brand. It impacts your cardholders. See, at the end of the day, fraud isn't a differentiator unless you do it bad, right? No one's lining up at financial institutions saying, hey, explain your fraud protection for me so I can open an account. No, they expect it. It's the expectation, and they expect fraud not to happen. But again, if all we're doing is that bull charge approach, then fraud's going to get in. Because just like my brothers, they're waiting. Fraudsters are waiting for you to just sidestep and guide you into a wall. So as we talk about it, really and truly, we talk about approaching it from different viewpoints, right? We talk about the products that we're using. We talk about the automation that we're able to employ. And ultimately, the data that we're going to be analyzing from that fraud. So when we talk about products, again, products are great, right? They're tools. And just like a hammer, your fraud prevention, your fraud strategies are a needful tool. We need to get better at understanding that fraud to prevent it. But if a contractor shows up to the job site with only a hammer, they're going to struggle, right? Regardless of how good that hammer is. Hammers can do a variety of different things, right? They're great for building. As I've learned, having a 5-year-old at home, they're great for destruction too, right? Again, that drywall patching is really coming in handy. But if all we have is that hammer, then we're sorely missing. So how do we add tools to that toolbox? We can always have that conversation of the build versus buy. And if we build, what happens, right? The tech team, we have to get the approvals, we have to get the budget. And then they go to the line of business and they say, give us your requirements. What do you need? What is happening in the industry today so we can build against that? And they take those requirements, and then over the next 6, 12, sometimes 18 months, they build out their MVP. And they bring that back to the line of business, and they present that to the line of business, and they say, here you go, here's exactly what you asked for. And ultimately, what happens? Line of business says, it's outdated. That was 12 months ago's fraud. We have new fraud happening. We got to send you back to the drawing board. And so we iterate, and we build, and we iterate, and we build, and we iterate, and we build. And it's this cyclical downward spiral where both parties are feeling neither are being good partners. And so as you look at those products, and you're seeing some today here on this stage, look for partnerships that are going to not only deliver a great tool, but build a partnership with you, that are going to be forward-thinking partnerships to help you continue to grow your business, right? Again, if this isn't a differentiator, unless it's bad, we got to make it good, but we want to do it in a way that we can reallocate that tech budget, that we can reallocate that human capital, right? So the products have to be new and ever-changing. And that leads then to the automation, right? We get a bright and shiny new product, and what happens? Right? It's like getting in a remote control car. Again, that wonderful 5-year-old boy with his Rambo bandana would get a car, and as he would come out, you'd want to play with that car, and if there's no batteries in it, what are you left doing? Manually pushing a car around, right? Might as well be a wind-up car at that point. Because ultimately, if we get these bright and shiny new toys, these new products and these new developments, but we're not capitalizing on the automation that's available to us today, again, we're not really moving in the right direction. We hear a lot of people that talk about, well, we're just throwing bodies at this problem, right? And so they're employing more manual work, which again is going to work to keep you compliant, up to date, right? But it's not making it a better process. So what does make it better, right? Again, we're living in a land that years ago was science fiction. Between machine learning, between AI, right, between automation that's employed today, these are all things that we couldn't even have fathomed. And so we're closely approaching that future land promise that the Jetsons gave us, right? I mean, we don't got the flying cars yet, but I was just reading an article yesterday about a robot maid that can serve and clean specific things. If we're not using this technology, we're getting left behind, right? Technology is not something to be afraid of. It's not something to fear, right? Who do we start to sound like? Well, we start to sound like farmers at the turn of the 19th century who said, oh, tractors, they're going to put people out of business, right? We grow, we adapt, we continue to learn, but if we employ that automation, now we can take that human capital, we can take those extra hands, and we can put them towards something that is going to be a differentiator for our business. Something that's going to drive revenue, not something that's compulsory and forced upon us. Once we get that automation in place, that leads us into the data that we analyze, right? I love this quote from the data Dr. Thomas Redman: where there's data smoke, there's a business fire. Right? If we're not getting the data on our fraud until there's smoke, our building's already on fire. And if it's taking that long to get that data, we're already behind the 8 ball. So again, as we look at that opportunity of bringing in these new products, bringing in this automation, how are we then utilizing it to look at fraud differently? How are we getting that data back into the hands of those faster so we can put out the fire? ultimately, we know that data is what drives business today, right? As you're looking at those strategic partnerships, one of the things we love to talk about is with our clients, we have that ability to look more holistically at data. We're not building this in a silo, because I can assure you guys, the fraud that's occurring today, fraudsters aren't building it in a silo. They're sharing their tips, they're sharing their secrets, they're sharing their best practices, right? A quick Google search can tell you how to defraud a bank. And yet, so many financial institutions are trying to solve this problem in a silo. And they're getting good, but it's still taking too long. So ultimately, with our clients, we have that ability to be able to look across the financial landscape. We have the ability to be able to look at how fraud is impacting enterprise banks differently than on processors. We have the ability to be able to look at how credit unions are approaching this differently than community banks. We can look geographically, we can look demographically, and the nice part about being that strategic partner is we can then share that data with our clients, right? Confidentially, we're not sharing anybody's secret sauce, but we have that ability to say, hey, here's what we're seeing in the industry. Here's what we're seeing happening across the landscape, and we can build with our partners a better community, right? We have that opportunity to be able to share that preemptively. We have the ability to be able to share that in real time. So now we are iterating at the speed that the fraud is occurring, right? Again, if we're waiting for a month-end report, fraud disputes, fraud trends, fraud claims aren't lasting a month before they're changing things up. So again, if we're not getting that data fast enough, we're always going to be behind what's occurring. So again, as we look at the products, as we look at employing that automation, and as we look at gathering that data more rapidly, it's going to help us as we approach our fraud issues. Again, ultimately, prevention is the first step. But just assuming that we can prevent all fraud is narrow-minded, right? Fraud is always going to be there. It's grown year over year over the last 2 decades. We need to get better at preventing it, but if all we're focusing in on is that prevention, we're never going to catch up, right? If we're taking that same bull rush approach, just like my brothers, there are fraudsters just waiting there to sidestep us and guide us gently into that wall. We can do this together because ultimately, again, this is a financial industry issue. We have to be able to partner to build more holistically and to get better together. Right? I'd love to share, to talk with each one of you as we work to combat this process. Appreciate your time today. Appreciate Finovate for hosting. Everybody have a great show. Thank you so much.